The Ordeal of Chen Guangrui and the Revenge of the River Monk. It is said that Chang'an City, the imperial capital of the Tang dynasty, was a renowned ancient capital where emperors had established their courts since the Zhou, Qin and Han dynasties. It was a land of breathtaking beauty with blooming flowers adorning its regions and 8 rivers winding around the city. At that time, Emperor Taizong of the Tang dynasty ascended the throne, changed the reign title to Zhenguang, and had been ruling for 13 years, with the year being Jiasai. The world was peaceful, tributes flowed in from all directions, and vassal states pledged allegiance to the Tang dynasty. One day, Emperor Taizong sat on the golden throne in the imperial palace, and all civil and military officials paid homage to him. Prime Minister Wei Jing stepped forward from the ranks and submitted a memorial, saying that the world was now peaceful and tranquil, so the ancient system should be followed to open an imperial examination to recruit talented scholars for the governance of the country. Emperor Taizong agreed, and immediately issued an imperial edict, posting notices all over the country. The notices stated that in every prefecture and county, regardless of whether one was a civilian or a military officer, any scholar who was well versed in literature and proficient in the 3 rounds of the imperial examination could come to Chang'an to take the test. The notice reached Taizhou Prefecture, where there lived a man named Chen Yi, styled Guangrui. When he saw the imperial notice, he was overjoyed and immediately went home to tell his mother, Mrs. Jiang. He said that the court had issued a notice to hold the imperial examination, and he intended to go to take the test. If he could obtain an official position, he would honor his ancestors, bring glory to his wife and children, and make his family renowned. Mrs. Jiang nodded and said that as a scholar, it was said that one learns in youth and acts in adulthood, so he should go. She reminded him to be careful on the journey and to return home as soon as he got the official position. Chen Guangrui followed his mother's instructions, told his servant to pack his luggage, bid farewell to his mother, and set off for Chang'an. He traveled day and night, and soon arrived at the capital. Just then, the imperial examination was about to begin, so he calmly entered the examination hall to take the test. After the examination, he passed successfully. In the final imperial interview, he answered the emperor's questions fluently. Emperor Taizong was impressed by his outstanding talent and personally awarded him the title of Zhuangyuan, the top scholar of the imperial examination. As the new Zhuangyuan, Chen Guangrui enjoyed great honor. According to the tradition, he rode a horse through the streets in celebration for 3 days. On one of those days, he passed by the mansion of Prime Minister Yin Kaishang. The Prime Minister had a daughter named Wen Jiao, also known as Mantang Jiao, who was unmarried. The mansion had set up a colorful tower, preparing for her to throw an embroidered ball to choose her husband. Just as Chen Guangrui rode by, Miss Yin lifted the curtain and looked down. She saw that the new Zhuangyuan was handsome and elegant, and a feeling of joy immediately arose in her heart. She held the embroidered ball, aimed at Chen Guangrui, and gently threw it. The ball hit Chen Guangrui's official hut right on target. Immediately after, a burst of melodious music filled the air, and more than a dozen maids and servants walked down the stairs, held the horse's head, and welcomed the new Zhuang Yuan into the mansion for the wedding. When Prime Minister Yin Kai-shan and his wife heard the news, they immediately came out to the hall, called for the master of ceremonies, and married their daughter to Chen Guangrui. They paid homage to heaven and earth, then bowed to each other as husband and wife, and finally paid respect to the parents-in-law. The Prime Minister ordered his servants to arrange a feast, and the mansion was filled with joy throughout the night. The couple held hands and entered the bridal chamber, and the tender moments of the night need not be elaborated. On the next day, at the 5th watch, Emperor Taizong sat on the golden throne, and all civil and military officials went to the court to pay their respects. Emperor Taizong asked which official position should be granted to Chen Guangrui, the new Zhuang Yuan. Prime Minister Wei Jing stepped forward and replied that after checking the vacant positions in the prefectures and counties, there was an opening in Jiangzhou Prefecture, and he begged the emperor to appoint Chen Guangrui as the prefect of Jiangzhou. Emperor Taizong agreed, and immediately ordered Chen Guangrui to take up the post, telling him not to delay the official deadline. Chen Guangrui thanked the emperor for his kindness and left the court. He returned to the prime minister's mansion and told his wife about the official appointment. After they discussed it, they bid farewell to their parents-in-law and set off for Jiangzhou to take up their post. As they left Chang'an and traveled on the road, it was late spring, with gentle wind blowing the green willows and drizzling rain dotting the red flowers. The scenery along the way was beautiful, but Chen Guangrui missed his mother, so he detoured home, taking his wife to pay a visit to Mrs. Jiang. Mrs. Jiang was overjoyed to see that her son had become the Zhuang Yuan and brought his wife back. Chen Guangrui stepped forward and reported that thanks to mother's blessings, he had the honor to be the Zhuang Yuan. When he was riding through the streets in celebration, he passed by the Prime Minister's mansion and was hit by the embroidered ball thrown by Miss Yin. The Prime Minister then married his daughter to him. Now the court had appointed him as the prefect of Jiangzhou, and he had come to take his mother to the post. Mrs. Jiang was very happy and quickly packed her luggage. The group traveled day and night, and after several days, they arrived at Wanhuan and stayed there. Unfortunately, shortly after they settled down, Mrs. Jiang suddenly fell ill. She told Chen Guangrui that she was not feeling well, and it would be better to rest in the inn for a few days before leaving. Chen Guangrui obeyed and stayed at the inn. On the next morning, Chen Guangrui got up and went out. He saw a man selling a golden carp at the door of the inn. He had a sudden thought and took a string of copper coins to buy the fish, intending to cook it for his mother to nourish her body. But when he picked up the fish, he saw that it was blinking its eyes. Chen Guangrui was surprised, for he had heard that fish or snakes that blinked were not ordinary creatures. He quickly stopped the fisherman and asked where he had caught the fish. The fisherman replied that he had caught it in the Hong River, 15 li away from here. After hearing this, Chen Guangrui took the fish to the Hong River and released it. He returned to the inn and told his mother about the release. Mrs. Jiang nodded and said that releasing living creatures was a good deed, and she was very pleased. They had stayed at the inn for 3 days, and the official deadline was urgent, so Chen Guangrui was anxious. He asked his mother if she felt better and if they could leave the next day. Mrs. Jiang sighed and said that she still felt unwell, and the weather on the road was hot, which might make her illness worse. She suggested that he rent a house here for her to stay temporarily, leave some money for her, and he and his wife go to take up the post first. They could come back to pick her up when the weather turned cool in autumn. Guangrui discussed it with his wife, then rented a house near the inn and left some money for his mother. The couple bid farewell to Mrs. Jiang and set off on the journey to Jiangzhou again. The trip was hard, with them traveling by day and resting by night. Before they knew it, they arrived at the Hong River ferry. There they saw two boatmen, Lu Hong and Li Biao, rowing the boat to the shore to greet them. It was Chen Guangrui's fate to encounter this disaster and meet these two villains. Chen Guangrui told his servant to carry the luggage onto the boat, and he and his wife were about to board the boat together. Lu Hong looked up and saw Miss Yin. She was a stunning beauty whose looks could outshine the moon and flowers, with a round face like a full moon, eyes like autumn waves, a small cherry mouth, and a slender waist like a willow branch. A wicked thought flashed through his mind, and he secretly plotted with Li Biao. They rowed the boat to a desolate place, and when midnight came, they killed the servant first, then beat Chen Guangrui to death, and threw both bodies into the river. When Miss Yin saw that her husband had been killed, she tried to jump into the river to commit suicide. But Lu Hong grabbed her and said that if she obeyed him, everything would be fine, and if she refused, he would kill her. Miss Yin thought that she had no other choice, and she was pregnant with her child, so she had to agree to Lu Hong reluctantly. The villain rowed the boat to the south bank, handed the boat over to Li Biao to take care of, then put on Chen Guangrui's official robe and hat, took the official credentials, and went to Jiangzhou to take up the post with Miss Yin. The body of the servant killed by Lu Hong drifted away with the current, but Chen Guangrui's body sank to the bottom of the river and did not move. The sea patrol Yiksha at the mouth of the Hong River saw this and immediately reported it to the Dragon King's palace. At that time, the Dragon King was holding court. The Yiksha reported that someone had beaten a scholar to death at the mouth of the Hong River and thrown his body into the water. The Dragon King ordered his subordinates to bring the body to him. He looked carefully at the body in front of him and was shocked, for this man was the benefactor who had saved his life. He thought that, as the saying goes, kindness should be repaid with kindness, and he must save this man's life to repay the favor he had received earlier. He immediately wrote a document and sent the Yiksha to the city god and the earth god of Hongzhou to fetch the scholar's soul to save his life. The city god and the earth god dared not delay, and immediately ordered the little ghosts to hand over Chen Guangrui's soul to the Yiksha. The Yiksha took the soul back to the Crystal Palace and reported to the Dragon King. The Dragon King asked the scholar his name, where he was from, and why he had been killed here. Chen Guangrui saluted and replied that his name was Chen Yi, styled Guangrui, and he was from Hongnong County, Haizhou Prefecture. He had the honor to be the Zhuangyuan of the imperial examination and was appointed as the prefect of Jiangzhou. He was on his way to take up the post with his wife, but when they boarded the boat at the riverbank, the boatman Lu Hong coveted his wife's beauty, beat him to death, and threw his body into the river. He begged the Dragon King to save him. When the Dragon King heard this, he suddenly realized. He said that the golden carp Chen Guangrui had released earlier was himself, and Chen Guangrui was his benefactor. Now that Chen Guangrui was in trouble, he would definitely save him. He immediately ordered his subordinates to place Chen Guangrui's body aside and put a preservation pearl in his mouth to prevent it from decaying, so that he could be revived later to take revenge. The Dragon King also told Chen Guangrui that his soul could stay in the underwater palace and serve as a commander for the time being. Chen Guangrui kowtowed to thank the Dragon King, who then held a feast to entertain him. Let us turn to Miss Yin. She hated Lu Hong deeply, wishing she could eat his flesh and sleep on his skin. But because she was pregnant and did not know if the child was a boy or a girl, she had to endure the humiliation and obey Lu Hong reluctantly. Time passed quickly, and before she knew it, they arrived in Jiang. The local officials and servants all came to welcome them, and the subordinate officials held a feast in the official hall to welcome the new prefect. Lu Hong pretended to be humble and said that he relied on the support of all the officials to govern the prefecture. The subordinate officials quickly replied that the prefect was a top scholar with outstanding talent, and he would surely govern the people like his own children, leading to a peaceful and orderly prefecture. They all depended on him, and he did not need to be so modest. After the feast, everyone left, and Lu Hong thus pretended to be Chen Guangrui and served as the prefect of Jiang. As time went by, several months passed. One day, Lu Hong had to go out on official business. Miss Yin was alone in the official residence, missing her mother-in-law and her husband, so she walked to the flower pavilion, feeling sad and depressed. Suddenly, she felt tired and had a stomachache, then fainted on the ground and gave birth to a baby boy. While she was in a daze, she heard a voice in her ear saying, "Mantang Jiao, listen to my instructions. I am the Southern Pole Star Lord, sent by the Guanyin Bodhisattva to give this child to you. This child will become famous in the future and will be extraordinary. When Lu Hong comes back, he will surely harm this child, so you must take good care of him. Your husband has been saved by the Dragon King, and in the future, you will be reunited with your husband and mother and son, and you will have the chance to avenge your grievances. Remember my words, wake up quickly." The voice faded away, and Miss Yin slowly woke up, remembering every word clearly. She held her son in her arms, feeling mixed emotions, but she had no idea what to do. Just then, Lu Hong came back. When he saw the child, he immediately wanted to drown him. Miss Yin thought quickly and said that it was getting late, and she would throw the child into the river the next day. Fortunately, early the next morning, Lu Hong had to leave again on urgent official business. Miss Yin thought secretly that if she waited for the villain to come back, her son would surely die. It would be better to throw him into the river now and let him fend for himself. If heaven pitied him, someone would save him and raise him, and they might meet again in the future. She was also worried that she would not be able to recognize her son in the future, so she bit her finger and wrote a blood letter, detailing her and her husband's names and the cause of their misfortune. She also bit off the little finger on his left foot as a mark of recognition. Then she took a close-fitting undershirt and wrapped the child up carefully. She took the opportunity to carry the child out of the official residence. Luckily, the official residence was not far from the river, and she soon arrived at the riverbank. Missing cried bitterly at the riverbank, about to throw the child into the river, when she suddenly saw a wooden board floating by the shore. She immediately knelt down and prayed to heaven, then placed the child on the wooden board, tied him up with a belt, and fastened the blood letter to his chest. After doing all this, she pushed the wooden board into the river and let it drift away. Missing turned around with tears in her eyes and walked back to the official residence, her sorrow unknown to anyone. The child lay on the wooden board, drifting along with the current, until he reached the foot of Jingshan Temple and stopped. The abbot of Jingshan Temple was a monk named Feiming, who was an enlightened Taoist with profound spiritual knowledge. On that day, monk Feiming was meditating, when he suddenly heard the cry of a baby coming from the riverbank. He was moved in his heart, immediately got up, and hurried to the riverbank to check. He saw a baby lying on a wooden board by the river. Monk Feiming quickly picked up the baby and held him in his arms. He saw the blood letter tied to the baby's chest, took it and read it, then knew the child's origin. The abbot gave the child a nickname, Jiang, and asked someone to take good care of him. He also kept the blood letter carefully. Time flew like an arrow, and the sun and moon passed quickly. Before anyone knew it, Jiang had grown up to be 18 years old. Monk Feiming saw that he was intelligent and had a good root, so he let him shave his head and become a monk, giving him the Dharma name Xuanzang. Xuanzang received the ordination and became a devout Buddhist, studying scriptures and practicing Buddhism in Jingshan Temple. One day, it was late spring again. The monks in the temple gathered under the pine trees, discussing scriptures and meditating, talking about the profound truths of Buddhism. Among them was a monk who indulged in wine and meat, and he was tongue-tied when asked by Xuanzang. The monk became angry out of embarrassment and cursed Xuanzang, saying that he was a beast who did not even know his own name or his parents, and had no right to discuss Buddhism here. Xuanzang was deeply touched by these words. He returned to the temple, knelt down in front of his master, and burst into tears. He said that human beings are born between heaven and earth, nurtured by yin and yang, and supported by the 5 elements. Everyone is born of a father and a mother, so how could there be someone in the world who has no parents? He begged his master repeatedly to tell him his parents' names. Monk Feiming looked at him and said slowly that if he really wanted to find his parents, he could follow him to the abbot's room. Xuanzang immediately got up and followed his master to the abbot's room. The abbot walked to the beam, took down a small box, opened it, took out the blood letter and the undershirt, and handed them to Xuanzang. Xuanzang took the blood letter with trembling hands and opened it to read. After reading it, he finally knew his parents' names and the tragedy that had befallen his family. Xuanzang cried bitterly and fell to the ground, saying that if he could not avenge his parents' hatred, he would not be a human being. For 18 years, he had not known his biological parents, and only today did he know he had a mother. If his master had not saved him and raised him, he would not have been alive today. He begged his master to let him go to find his mother, and then he would return to rebuild the temple and repay his master's great kindness. Monk Feiming nodded and told Xuanzang that if he wanted to find his mother, he could take the blood letter and the undershirt with him. He should pretend to be a wandering monk begging for alms, and go directly to the private residence of the prefect in Jiang, where he would be able to meet his mother. Xuanzang followed his master's instructions, immediately changed into the clothes of a wandering monk, took the blood letter and the undershirt, and set off for Jiangzhou directly. It was fate that mother and son would meet. When Xuanzang arrived in Jiangzhou, Lu Hong happened to be out on official business. Xuanzang went straight to the gate of the private residence of the prefect and called out softly, begging for alms. In recent days, Miss Yin had often dreamed of the moon being full again after being crescent. She thought secretly that she had no news of her mother-in-law, and her husband had been killed by that villain. Her son was thrown into the river, and if someone had saved him and raised him, he would be 18 years old now. Maybe heaven would let them meet today. She was lost in thought when she suddenly heard someone chanting scriptures and begging for alms in front of the private residence. Miss Yin's heart moved, and she took the opportunity to walk out and ask where he was from. Xuanzang replied that he was a disciple of monk Feiming, the abbot of Jinshan Temple. When Miss Yin heard this, she quickly said that since he was a disciple of the abbot of Jinshan Temple, he could follow her into the residence. She led Xuanzang into the residence and ordered her servants to prepare vegetarian food for him. After Xuanzang finished eating, Miss Yin looked at him carefully, and found that his behavior and speech were exactly the same as her husband Chen Guangrui. She dismissed the servants around her and asked him alone if he had become a monk since childhood or in his middle age, what his name was, and if he had parents. Xuanzang raised his head, his eyes filled with grief and anger, and replied that he had not become a monk since childhood or in his middle age. He said that his hatred was as deep as the sea and as great as the sky. His father had been killed by a villain, and his mother had been occupied by the villain. His master monk Feiming had told him to come to the prefect's residence in Jiangzhou to find his mother. When Miss Yin heard this, her heart was filled with waves of emotion. She quickly asked what his mother's surname was. Xuanzang replied that his mother's surname was Yin, named Wen Jiao, and his father's surname was Chen, named Guangrui. His nickname was Jiang, and his Dharma name was Xuanzang. Miss Yin could no longer hold back her emotions and said tremblingly that she was Wen Jiao. But she asked what proof he had. When Xuanzang heard that she was his mother, he immediately knelt down on both knees and cried bitterly. He said that if his mother did not believe him, he had the blood letter and the undershirt as proof. Miss Yin took the blood letter and the undershirt and read them, confirming that they were exactly what she had written and left back then. Mother and son hugged each other and cried bitterly for a long time. After a while, Miss Yin stopped crying and said anxiously that her son must leave quickly. Xuanzang cried and said that he had not known his biological parents for 18 years, and now that he had finally met his mother, how could he bear to leave? Miss Yin persuaded him with tears in her eyes that he must leave as soon as possible. If Lu Hong came back, he would surely kill him. She would pretend to be ill the next day, saying that she had made a vow in her childhood to donate 100 pairs of monk shoes, and she would go to his temple to fulfill the vow. At that time, she would have something to say to him. Xuanzang had to obey, bid farewell to his mother, and hurry back to Jinshan Temple. After meeting her son, Missing felt both worried and happy. She worried about her son's safety and was happy about their reunion. One day, she pretended to be ill, refusing to eat or drink, and lying in bed. Before long, Lu Hong returned to the residence. When he saw that Miss Ying was lying in bed ill, he asked her what was wrong. Miss Ying replied that she had made a vow in her childhood to donate 100 pairs of monk shoes. 5 days ago, she had dreamed of a monk holding a sharp knife, asking her for the monk shoes. Since then, she had not been feeling well. Lu Hong did not take it seriously and said that it was such a small matter, and she should have told him earlier. He immediately went to the official hall and ordered Wang Zuya and Li Yuya to tell every household in Jiangzhou City to make a pair of monk shoes, which must be completed within 5 days. The common people did not dare to disobey, and all completed the task as required. Missing said to Lu Hong that the monk shoes were ready, and she asked what temples there were in the area where she could go to fulfill her vow. Lu Hong replied that there were Jinshan Temple and Jiashan Temple in Jiangzhou, and she could choose whichever she wanted. Missing quickly said that she had long heard that Jinshan Temple was a good temple, and she would go to Jinshan Temple. Lu Hong immediately ordered Wang and Li to prepare a boat. Missing took her trusted servants, boarded the boat, and the boatman rowed the boat straight to Jinshan Temple. On the other side, Xuanzang returned to the temple and told monk Feiming everything that had happened. The abbot was very happy when he heard this. The next day, a maid came to the temple first, saying that the prefect's wife had come to fulfill her vow. All the monks went out of the temple to welcome her. Missing walked straight into the temple gate, worshipped the Bodhisattva first, and then offered a large sum of money for the temple. She called the maid, put the prepared monk shoes and socks on a plate, and walked to the Dharma hall. Missing lit incense and worshipped again in the Dharma hall, then asked monk Feiming to distribute the monk shoes to all the monks. After the monks left, there was no one else in the Dharma hall. Xuanzang then stepped forward and knelt down. Missing told him to take off his shoes and socks, and looked carefully, finding that the little finger on his left foot was indeed missing. Mother and son hugged each other and cried again. After crying, they thanked monk Feiming together for raising Xuanzang. Monk Feiming said that now that mother and son had reunited, they should leave quickly to avoid being discovered by the villain and bringing disaster upon themselves. Missy nodded, took out a fragrant bracelet from her arms, and handed it to Xuanzang. She told Xuanzang to take the fragrant bracelet and go directly to the northwest of Hongzhou Prefecture, about 1500 li away, where there was a place called Wanhuan. At that time, she and his father had left his grandmother Mrs. Jiang there, who was his father's biological mother. She would also write a letter for him, and he should go directly to the residence of Prime Minister Yin Kaishan, which was on the left side of the Golden Palace in the imperial capital of the Tang dynasty. Prime Minister Yin was her biological father. He should hand the letter to his grandfather, asking his grandfather to report to Emperor Taizong, leading the army to capture and kill the villain, avenging his father. Only in this way could her mother be rescued. She said that she did not dare to stay long, fearing that the villain would be angry if she returned late. After saying this, Missing left the temple and boarded the boat to return. Xuanzang cried and went back to the temple, told his master, then immediately bid farewell and set off for Hongzhou directly. He traveled day and night, and finally arrived at Guangrui. He found the inn where he had stayed with his parents back then, and asked the innkeeper Lu Xiao how Mrs. Jiang, the mother of Prefect Chen from Jiangzhou who had stayed at his inn years ago, was doing now. Lu Xiao sighed and replied that she had originally stayed at his inn, but later she lost her sight, and had not paid the room rent for 3 or 4 years. Now she lived in a broken tile kiln at the south gate, begging for a living on the street every day. The prefect had left a long time ago, and there had been no news of him until now, and no one knew what had happened to him. After hearing this, Xuanzang was filled with grief. He immediately bid farewell to Lu Xiao, asked for directions to the broken tile kiln at the south gate, and finally found his grandmother Mrs. Jiang in the kiln. Mrs. Jiang heard his voice and said weakly that his voice sounded just like her son Chen Guangrui. Xuanzang knelt down in front of the kiln, crying and saying that he was not Chen Guangrui, but Chen Guangrui's son, and Miss Yin Wenjiao was his mother. Mrs. Jiang asked tremblingly why his parents had not come. Xuanzang replied that his father had been killed by robbers, and his mother had been occupied by the robbers. Mrs. Jiang then asked how he knew to come to find her. Xuanzang took out the fragrant bracelet and said that his mother had sent him to find her, and he had a letter and a fragrant bracelet from his mother. Mrs. Jiang took the letter and the fragrant bracelet, and burst into tears. She cried and said that her son had come here for his official career, and she had thought that he had forgotten his kindness and turned his back on her. She had never thought that he had been killed by villains. Fortunately, heaven had pitied her and did not let her son's line die out, and now her grandson had come to find her. Xuanzang looked at his grandmother's cloudy eyes, feeling very distressed, and asked why her eyes had become like this. Mrs. Jiang replied that she had missed his father so much, waiting for him day and night, but he never came back, so she had cried until she lost her sight. After hearing this, Xuanzang immediately knelt down on the ground and prayed to heaven. He prayed that he was 18 years old now, and he had not been able to avenge his parents' hatred. Today, he had come to find his grandmother according to his mother's order, and he begged heaven to pity his sincerity and restore his grandmother's eyesight. After praying, Xuanzang put his tongue to his grandmother's eyes and gently licked them. In a moment, Mrs. Jiang's eyes slowly opened, and her eyesight was restored. She looked at the young monk in front of her, tears streaming down her face, and said that he was indeed her grandson, and he looked exactly like her son Chen Guangrui. Mrs. Jiang was both happy and sad, and Xuanzang also burst into tears. Xuanzang helped his grandmother out of the kiln and returned to Lu Xiao's inn. He rented a room for his grandmother to live in, and left some money for her. He told his grandmother that he would be back in about a month, then immediately bid farewell to her and set off for the imperial capital directly. After a long journey, Xuanzang finally arrived in Chang'an. He found the residence of Prime Minister Ing Kai-shan on East Street of the Imperial City, and told the gatekeeper that he was a relative of the Prime Minister and had come to visit him. The gatekeeper did not dare to delay and immediately reported to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister Ing frowned and said that he had no relatives who were monks. Mrs. Ing, the Prime Minister's wife, heard this and quickly said that she had dreamed of her daughter Jiang coming home last night, and she wondered if her son-in-law had sent a letter back. Prime Minister was moved, and ordered his servants to invite the young monk to the hall. When Xuanzang saw the Prime Minister and his wife, he immediately knelt down on the ground and cried, taking a letter out of his arms and handing it to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister Ing opened the letter and read it from beginning to end, then burst into tears. Mrs. Ing quickly asked what had happened. The Prime Minister choked up and said that this monk was their grandson. His son-in-law Chen Guangrui had been killed by a villain, and Jiang had been occupied by the villain as his wife. Mrs. Ing also burst into tears when she heard this. After crying for a long time, the Prime Minister wiped his tears and said that his wife should not be sad, and he would report to the Emperor the next day, leading the army personally to avenge his son-in-law. The next day, at the court meeting, Prime Minister Ing stepped forward and submitted a memorial to Emperor Taizong. He said that his son-in-law Chen Guangrui, the Zhuangyuan of the imperial examination, had been appointed as the prefect of Jiangzhou and had gone to take up the post with his family. But on the way, he had been killed by the boatman Lu Hong, who had occupied his daughter as his wife and pretended to be his son-in-law, serving as the prefect for many years. This was an extraordinary incident, and he begged the emperor to send troops immediately to eliminate the villain. When Emperor Taizong heard this, he was extremely angry. He immediately ordered 60,000 imperial guards to be dispatched, with Prime Minister Ing leading the army to go there. The Prime Minister accepted the imperial edict and left the court, immediately going to the military training ground to assemble the troops, and then set off for Jiangzhou directly. The army traveled day and night, and before they knew it, they arrived in Jiangzhou. Prime Minister Ing stationed the army on the north bank of the river, and then sent a messenger to summon the Tongji and Jizhou of Jiangzhou overnight. The Prime Minister told them what had happened, asking them to lead their troops to assist, and then they crossed the river together. Before dawn, the army surrounded the prefect's residence tightly. Lu Hong was still in his dream when he suddenly heard the sound of cannons and the clash of golden drums. The soldiers rushed into the private residence, and Lu Hong was caught off guard and quickly captured. The Prime Minister issued an order to tie Lu Hong and all his accomplices to the execution ground, and ordered the army to camp outside the city. After making arrangements, the Prime Minister walked into the official hall and sat down, sending someone to invite Miss Ing to come out to meet him. Miss Ing wanted to go out, but she was ashamed to see her father, and even wanted to hang herself. When Xuanzang heard this, he hurried to save his mother. He knelt down on both knees and said to his mother that he and his grandfather had led the army here to avenge his father. Now the villain had been captured, so why did his mother want to kill herself? If his mother died, he would not be able to live either. Prime Minister Ing also entered the residence to comfort her. Missing cried and said that, as the saying goes, a woman should be faithful to one husband for a lifetime. She was deeply saddened that her husband had been killed by the villain, and how could she have the face to lie with the villain? She had only endured the humiliation to survive because she was pregnant with her child. Now that her son had grown up, and she had seen her father leading the army to avenge her husband, as a daughter, she had no face to meet anyone. She only wanted to die to repay her husband. The Prime Minister sighed and said that this was not because his daughter had changed her loyalty because of the ups and downs of fortune, but because she had no other choice, so she should not feel ashamed. Father and daughter hugged each other and cried, and Xuanzang also cried bitterly beside them. After crying for a long time, the Prime Minister wiped his tears and said that they should stop being sad, and he would go to deal with the villain now. The Prime Minister got up and went to the execution ground, just as the Tongji of Jiang sent his soldiers to capture the boatman Li Biao and bring him to the execution ground. The Prime Minister was very happy, immediately ordering the executioners to flog Lu Hong and Li Biao 100 times each. Under the torture, they had to confess their crimes, admitting that they had plotted to kill Chen Guangrui years ago. The Prime Minister immediately ordered Li Biao to be tied to a wooden donkey, sent to the downtown area, cut into pieces, and his head to be hung up for public display. He then ordered Lu Hong to be taken to the Hong River Ferry, the place where he had killed Chen Guangrui years ago. The Prime Minister, Missing and Xuanzang went to the riverbank in person, offering sacrifices to heaven and earth, then cutting out Lu Hong's heart and liver alive to sacrifice to Chen Guangrui, and burning his sacrificial document. The three of them cried bitterly by the river, and their cries shook the underwater palace. The Sea Patrol Yiksha took the sacrificial document and presented it to the Dragon King. After reading the document, the Dragon King immediately ordered the Turtle Marshal to invite Chen Guangrui to come to the hall. The Dragon King smiled and said that he should congratulate him, for now his wife, son and father-in-law were all by the river sacrificing to him, and he would send him back to the human world to be revived. The Dragon King also took out a wish-granting pearl, 2 rolling pearls, 10 pieces of fine silk, and a jade belt inlaid with pearls, giving them to Chen Guangrui as gifts. He said that Chen Guangrui could be reunited with his wife, mother and son today. Chen Guangrui thanked the Dragon King repeatedly. The Dragon King then ordered the Yiksha to send Chen Guangrui's body out of the river to be revived. Let us return to the riverbank. After sacrificing to her husband, Miss Ying was so grief-stricken that she wanted to jump into the river to commit suicide again. Xuanzang was so frightened that he held her tightly. Just as they were in a panic, they suddenly saw a body floating on the water, approaching the riverbank. Miss Ying hurried forward to look, and recognized that it was her husband Chen Guangrui's body. She burst into tears again. Everyone came to look, and saw Chen Guangrui stretching his hands and feet, his body gradually moving, then suddenly sitting up. Everyone was shocked. Chen Guangrui opened his eyes and saw Miss Ying, his father-in-law Prime Minister Ying, and the young monk beside him crying. Chen Guangrui asked why they were here. Miss Ying cried and told him everything that had happened. She said that after he had been killed by the villain, she had given birth to this child, who had been lucky enough to be saved and raised by monk Feiming of Jinshan Temple. The child had later come to find her, and she had told him to go to find his grandfather. After his grandfather had learned about it, he had reported to Emperor Taizong, leading the army here to capture the villain. Just now, they had cut out the villain's heart and liver to sacrifice to him, and she did not know how he had been revived. After hearing this, Chen Guangrui suddenly realized. He said that it was all because when they were staying at Guangrui years ago, he had bought and released a golden carp, which turned out to be the Dragon King here. Later, the villain had pushed him into the water, and he had been saved by the Dragon King. Now the Dragon King had given him the chance to be revived and had given him many treasures, which were all on his body. He had never thought that she had given birth to their son, and that his father-in-law had avenged him. This was truly a great joy after great suffering. When the officials heard this, they all came to congratulate them. The Prime Minister immediately ordered a feast to be prepared to thank the subordinate officials. After the celebration feast, the army set off to return to the imperial capital the next day. When they passed by Guangrui, the Prime Minister ordered the army to camp there. Chen Guangrui then went to Lu Shaoxin with Xuanzang to find his mother. Mrs. Jiang had dreamed the night before that a withered tree had bloomed, and magpies had been chirping constantly behind her house. She had thought that maybe her grandson was coming. As she was thinking, she saw Chen Guangrui and his son walking to the door of the inn. The young monk pointed to her and said that this was his grandmother. When Chen Guangrui saw his mother, he immediately knelt down on the ground. Mother and son hugged each other and cried bitterly, and Chen Guangrui told her everything that had happened in detail. After that, Chen Guangrui paid the room rent to Lu Shao, and the group set off to return to the imperial capital. When they entered the Prime Minister's mansion, Chen Guangrui, Miss Yin, Mrs. Jiang and Xuanzang all went to meet Mrs. Yin. Mrs. Yin was overjoyed and ordered her servants to prepare a grand feast to celebrate. The Prime Minister said that this feast could be named the Reunion Feast. For a moment, the Prime Minister's mansion was filled with joy and celebration. The next day, at the court meeting, Emperor Taizong sat on the golden throne. Prime Minister Yin stepped forward and reported everything that had happened in detail, and recommended that Chen Guangrui was a talented person who could be given an important official position. Emperor Taizong agreed, immediately ordering Chen Yi to be promoted to the position of scholar, to serve in the court and participate in state governance. Xuanzang was determined to practice Buddhism wholeheartedly, so Emperor Taizong sent him to Hongfu Temple to practice. Later, Miss Yin finally committed suicide calmly to preserve her chastity and integrity. Xuanzang went to Jinshan Temple to repay monk Feiming for his kindness of raising him. What happened next, we will wait for the next chapter to find out.